Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Vivien Chien, author of the Noodle Shop Mysteries. My obligatory plug today is for Dim Sum of All Fears. This is book number 2 in the Noodle Shop Mysteries. I'm really excited to walk down memory lane with this book. This whole thing, the whole series videos, it's a lot of fun for me. So just quick reminder that the giveaway is only for US residents. You must be a subscriber and you must leave a comment in this video to be able to qualify to win a copy. I picked the Crime Rangoon winner, and I used Comment Picker, and it made life very easy. So basically what it does is I send a link to commentpicker.com of the video, and it goes through the different names and does its own raffle. And then I post a little graphic after each selection. So we have the Death by Dumpling winner coming up Friday the 10th. It is currently Tuesday, but you guys will see this video on Thursday because I do quality control editing and, you know, I make the graphic and all that kind of stuff. So let's get into it. Oh, I don't know if I said April 17th will be the winner for this giveaway. And you must comment before 12 p.m. Eastern. And that's it for that. So I got my little notes with me because I tend to forget things as I'm doing them. So how I start each video is I read the back cover of the book, and then I'll get into talking about the actual like behind the scenes type of stuff. So the top little, I never know what you call this. I used to know, but I don't know anymore. But it says, welcome back to Holy Noodle House, where you can get fantastic takeout unless you get taken out first. Huzzah. All right, here we go. I'm going to put my readers on. All right, Lana Lee is a dutiful daughter waiting tables at her family's Chinese restaurant, even though she'd rather be doing just about anything else. Then, just when she has a chance for a real job, her parents take off to Taiwan, leaving Lana in charge. Surprisingly, everyone, including herself, surprising everyone. Sorry. Okay, let me start over. Surprising everyone, including herself, she turns out to be quite capable of running the place. Unfortunately, the newlyweds who just opened the souvenir shop next door to Holy Noodle House have turned up dead. And soon Lana finds herself in the midst of an Asia Village mystery. Between running the Holy Noodle House and trying to figure out whether the rock-solid detective Adam Trudeau is actually her boyfriend, Lana knows she shouldn't pry into the case. But the more she learns about the dead husband, his ex-wives, and all the murky details of the couple's past, the more Lana thinks this so-called murder/suicide is a straight-up order of murder. Huzzah. I say huzzah a lot. I like it. It's Fraser's fault. Blame it on Fraser and his brother Niles. Okay, anyways. So, Dim Sum of All Fears. The first thing when I was sitting down thinking to myself, like, what am I going to talk about when it comes to this book? Because it's been so long, you know. The most interesting thing that sticks out to me about this book is that the title was not supposed to be Dim Sum of All Fears. And, you know, when this is all going on, I'm still new. I have only written Death by Dumpling. So I don't know how things work in the publishing world. I don't know, you know, how they decide and choose and do whatever. And like I mentioned in my last video, they gave me a sampling of titles. So the second book I chose, because I did like a murder/suicide theme, was Hot and Sour Suicide. Not my title, again, you know, just that's what it was supposed to be. However, after the book was already titled, there was a situation in the media. I can't remember specifically if it was a rash of suicides or if it was a specific, like a large presence, you know, like somebody in movies or something like that. But there was a horrible story in the media. And, you know, there was a lot of upset over it. And the publishers felt like maybe that's not the right word to use in a book title. and I hadn't really thought about it. Things have changed a lot in the past couple of years, as far as word choices and things like that, and what you can say and what's acceptable and all of that. So it was really like a shifting of gears, and let's be sensitive. And then I started to worry about the book because I'm like, well, this is what this is called. Like, that's what I based the plot on. So, I was like, okay. And there were some people that they were like, there's nothing crazy in it. It's a cozy, there's never anything overtly risque, we'll say. So, I was like, okay, we're just going to run and see how this goes because, it's part of the story and it's not meant to like upset anybody or whatever. So they wanted to change the name of the title. Okay, fine. I totally get it. I had already written the story. So we're already past, like, it's done. This change came after the fact. So they came up with some names, and I don't remember what any of them were because they decided almost right away, we're going to call this Dim Sum of All Fears. And then I looked up Sum of All Fears, and I'm like, my book plot doesn't nod to that. It doesn't resemble, like spy things. Like, there's nothing. So I was like, I don't want that for my title. And they were like, trust us. It's not about the title matching the story. It's about something being catchy, something, like recognizable, like tongue in cheek, and people are really going to appreciate the title. It doesn't have to match the story. And I've always been a person that, because, I'm a reader myself, I always like it when the title has something to do with what's in the book. So I was up in arms about this. I mean, I just would not let it go. And I talked to my agent about it, and I kept asking my editor at the time, I'm like, are you sure this is a good idea? And everybody was like, don't worry about it. So I'm like, I just got to let things go. And when you are an author and when you are published, you do have to let some things go. And I attribute it to the fact that these people are professionals and they know what they're talking about. They know what they're doing. They have sales teams. They have marketing teams. Like, they know, right? So I'm like, just let it go. But again, I'm new. So the book comes out and everybody freaking loves the title. Everybody. People are stopping me at book conferences to be like, that's such a cute title. I love it so much. To this day, it is still everybody's favorite title out of all of my books. Which is really surprising. And the book that I just wrote that will be coming out this August of 26 is called And Then There Were Bun, which is a nod to Agatha Christie. However, there's an interesting story behind that title as well. I will tell that later. But it's, it seems like that it is a big hit when it's recognizable to people, when they see it, and then they're like, that's catchy, and they like it. So no one's ever said, well, your book doesn't match, the plot line for Sum of All Fears. I don't think anybody expects that. And, I'm sure there are people out there like me who, like to match things up, but it's whatever it is. So that I thought was like the most interesting part of revisiting this book and thinking about like how new I was, So when I wrote Death by Dumpling, I was so nervous. And you write these books well before they're out. I finished And Then There Were Bun a couple months ago, and then I've been going through the editing process, and then it will come out in August. So you have like this gap in between where things are out and things are not out, and you're finished and you're working on the next project. But I remember, Death by Dumpling was well received, and I was so happy, but it added a pressure, because I was worried, what if I couldn't do it again? What if I couldn't, repeat the success? I thought, I don't want to be a one-hit wonder. And I think every author worries about that, because now you realize you're in it. You are doing it. and it's real, and people are out there and they're applauding you or they're criticizing you, and for better or worse, you're in it. So I was really nervous when I was writing Dim Sum of All Fears because I was worried that I couldn't recreate the success. What if this doesn't pan out? And I spoke with some of my author friends. I talk a lot in different interviews and different videos about, she's so many people. A lot of people know her as Kylie Logan. She's also Anastasia Hastings. She writes cozy mysteries. She is my fairy godmother. And I ask her for advice all the time. And the one thing that I asked her at that moment, I was like, when is that going to go away? Like, how long am I going to doubt myself? And she said, look, it's always going to be like that. You're always going to wonder if you can do it again. And you just kind of get used to that. And I didn't believe her. Not because she's ever fibbed to me, but because I thought she was trying to make me feel better. Like I wanted to ask the opinion of a seasoned author. She's written like over 60 novels or something crazy, and I really wanted her advice, and I wanted her to be honest with me and say, like, look, this will happen and you'll transition and then you're going to be like confident in everything that you do. And I really thought she was just trying to make me feel better. Don't point out the fact that I'm insecure about, my next book. She wasn't lying. I can say that now, and I can give the same advice to new authors. I just wrote my 13th book, and I still wonder. I still am like, do I even know what I'm doing? A lot of authors deal with, feeling like, like, how could you keep doing this? And you wonder, but you can. The story is always in you. And you just have to let yourself go and trust the process. And I went to a great Sisters in Crime meeting. I can't remember if we were hosting somebody from the Pittsburgh chapter or if it was just on like a Zoom or something. But she said the best advice, she said, as an author, you need to get out of your own way. And I loved that, and I always held on to it. I forget the other details, but I remember that part because you really do have to get out of your own way. You are your own worst critic when you're doing these things. And I think that a lot of times when authors get upset when they see certain reviews of somebody saying a particular something about their book, they get upset because they thought that themselves, and then now someone else is saying it. It's not always true. I try and take everything that I see with a grain of salt. And honestly, I don't read reviews anymore, unless it's something that stands out for some reason. But I don't sit on Goodreads, I don't sit on Amazon, and I don't read them anymore because you will have 54 glowing reviews. People will talk about how much they love your books, they're a reader for life, blah, 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 but then there's that one person and they're like, I didn't like it. And they don't really, like, a lot of times people just say they don't like it. They don't give a real reason. And you'll fixate on that. You will fixate on the fact that this one person didn't like your book. Forget the 54 other people that thought you were a genius. This one person. So in the beginning, I went on to David Baldacci's Amazon reviews. Like, I just picked a book. I don't even remember what book it is. I just, he's a best-selling author for New York Times. So I'm like, let me look and see what people have to say about him. And there are people on there, that give David Baldacci, who is a massive author, a 1-star review. It's everywhere. It's everybody. It's everything. And you have to kind of learn to let go of that and not worry about it and think to yourself, do I like my book? And did you do what you set out to do? So it was a very big learning process in the beginning. When I was writing Dim Sum of All Fears, it being the second book, so the first book is like a setup. Like, here you are with this new person, And here is her family, here are her friends, here is her job. And you're kind of learning the inner workings of everything. But when I got into Dim Sum of All Fears, I really wanted to get into it. Like, okay, now let's look at the daily life and let's throw in some problems. Lana doesn't want to do this job. She never wanted to be in the service industry. And then she is stuck, because of her bills and everything. So then I thought, well, how long is someone really going to just do that? I know for myself, I would have to start looking for another job. So that's what I made Lana do. And in the beginning of the book, Lana has an interview set up for another job. She's done with it. She doesn't want to do anything. And then her and her family go to Dim Sum, and her parents say, surprise, we're leaving for Taiwan in 3 days. And Lana, you're in charge of the restaurant. Well, I had to make it so that her older sister did not like that, because why aren't they asking the oldest to take over, what her parents consider their prize jewel? And, in the storyline, Anime is going to school to become a lawyer because she is, the ideal child, the one that does what she's supposed to do and is prim and proper. She is, herself put together. And so she's studying to be a lawyer, and her parents say, well, you're too busy to do this. And like, what's kind of like, hey, what's Lana doing with her life? And then it's like, hey, wait a minute. So you see the dynamic of Lana's life changing and her starting to realize that maybe things aren't truly gonna go the way that she thought. I didn't know how pivotal that would be in expressing my own life and where my life ended up going as I got further into the series. But it was like, I remember writing the story, and there was this moment where Lana was like, oh no, this is not what I wanted at all, and so you have that to contend with. Then as soon as her parents leave, like they're in the plane, okay, then there's a murder at the place next door. The one that I was telling you guys is like the haunted property. And Lana is like, oh no, not this again, and she's like, I'm just starting to like recover from the last thing that happened. And now this is happening. And, it's just one thing after another, like real life. So she's like contending with that. Like, now I got to solve this. I got to run the restaurant. What's going on with this Adam Trudeau guy? Is he my boyfriend? Is he not my boyfriend? Like, she doesn't know what's going on, and there's a lot of upheaval in her life. And then I wanted to examine the relationships further, the tensions that go between Megan and Kimmy, or like how Adam was going to fit into her life, or how her being a manager of a restaurant is going to fit in her life, and she still has the interview to go to. So there's all these things that she's contending with. And I wanted to really put the pressure on to show the dimensions of where the series was going to go. That it's never going to be there's always going to be a subplot, right? It's never just going to be like, this is the story of Lana. This is what happened in whatever XYZ murder. And then the end. It's dynamic. There is a subplot. There are themes that match what is going on in her own life versus what she's dealing with outside of her life. I like to intertwine them so that she's learning something from what she's doing, because you need to learn something from what you go through. I am a strong believer of that. A lot of people go through bad things, and I have myself, and you can either walk away from it as like, this sucked, it ruined my life, blah, blah, blah. Or you could take something from it. You could say, well, this was sucky, but what did I learn? What can I take away from this experience? So I implement that in all of my books, where Lana is taking something. where maybe she's resenting a certain part of her life, or she doesn't understand the concept of something. And through her trials, she learns about the thing that she doesn't understand or doesn't like, and kind of comes to an acceptance of whatever that thing may be. So that was very important for me to start really needling those things in, you know. The other thing, to look at my notes, was, okay, so the next thing I guess I would want to talk about is duty versus, well, I guess, you know, family obligation and what you want for yourself. In Asian culture, it can be very conflicting. And mind you, I'm only 50%. Like, I only have a half a duty. But, you know, I would say, like, the Italian side of my family is not, it's not the same at all. On the, you know, my mom has expectations when I'm growing up. I want you to be this is what's acceptable. I want you to do X, Y, and Z. You know, and my dad's side and my grandma, you know, my grandmother, my Italian grandmother was a huge influence on my life. She was like a second mother. You know, she's like, I want you to do what makes you happy, like whatever that may mean. You know, my grandma was, you know, when I was going through, you know, my grunge phase when I was a teenager, and like I had a chain wallet and spike bracelets and stuff, my grandma never was like, ugh, what are you doing? She was like, I like that you have weapons on your body. She's like, because somebody's going to try and hurt you and you have something to fight back with. Like, that's the way that she was, you know? So you have these two polar opposites. But like a lot of Asian culture is be the dutiful daughter. These are the things that you do. Act right, proper, have a successful job, marry a good husband. You know, these are the things. And, you know, it doesn't always line up with people and what they want to do. Like when I was younger and I would tell, you know, people I wanted to be a writer, they thought I was weird. They're like, you're not going to make any money from that, and you probably won't ever get published. And that's stupid. But that's what I want to do, though. You know, I love to create stories, and, you know, Anne Rice was a huge influence on me. I wrote little short stories when I was in school, like second or third grade, for my classmates for show and tell. And, you know, it was quickly kiboshed. Let's just put it that way. It wasn't something that I was told to strive for in any avenue, because it's a dreamer job. You know, it's like, I want to be an artist, you know, or I want to be a movie star. Like, it's not, although I will say my mom did promote me. She wanted me to be a movie star, for sure. But, you know, people want you to have a solid job that pays well, like your parents, I mean, you know. And Lana's parents wanted her to, you know, take care of the restaurant. I think that, you know, that's normal, I think, in a lot of families, especially when the family has a business. Whatever it could be a hardware store, like, I don't care, you know. You want to pass that down to the next generation. You want, you know, like the parents, they built this from the ground. It was nothing, you know, and they made it into something, and now they want to give it to you. They want to share it with you. So there's nothing wrong with that. However, that doesn't always line up with what you want, you know. So I think I wanted to really show that Lana was struggling with that. It was like, okay, there's this thing I want to do. I want to have a different job, but my family needs me. And I'm torn. And I wanted to show that because I do feel that that is a relatable aspect for a lot of families. It's not even just, it doesn't even have to be your family owns a business. It says your family is into something and they want you to be that too. You know, like if someone's mom is a psychologist, you're peppered with psychological facts as you're growing up. They teach you through speech, you know, just the way that they talk to you, or, you know, they'll explain behavior or whatever. And then they probably, unless it's a very self-aware psychologist, this is getting into a different conversation, but, you know, my point is that they would lean towards like, I want you to study this too. Like, I want you to be this. You know, when you see that with a lot of like famous people, if they're an actor, 9 times out of 10, their kid is an actor. Or, you know, like models, their kids are models. You know, like that one lady, I can't think of her name, she's gorgeous. She was on Beverly Hills Housewives. Yes, she was on Beverly Hills. And Gigi and Bella are her daughter's name. Yolanda. There we go. So, like, her daughters ended up becoming models. So you kind of get where I'm going with this. But I felt like it was very important to add those elements into it and show her, you know, fighting herself. Like, what do I do? And I also wanted to add in that Lana has this internal sense of justice. It's not about just being nosy. It's not about, well, this got thrown into my lap. Although it is thrown into her lap. But it's that she doesn't want the bad guy to win. Especially when it's people that are close to her. So, you know, she really has this, I need to get into this because of that reason. However, in the beginnings, somebody is convincing her that this is the right thing. Like, she knows it in the back of her mind, but she needs a push. So, you know, a lot of times it's Megan, it's Kimmy. They're like, come on, are you just going to sit by and watch this happen? Like, we got to do something, you know? And so then Lana's like, oh, yeah, you're right, we do. And so then she does, you know, and then we have a story. So I made sure to show all of those things. The other thing that I wanted to bring up that I felt was very interesting, and I may end it on this note, because I am trying to keep these around 30-ish minutes. I wanted to talk about the patterns of speech, because this came up a lot in the beginning, and I've kind of toned down some of the stuff in the later books, because I didn't really want to deal with some of the stuff. Well, I'll get into that. So Lana's mother and a lot of Lana's friends, moms, the Mahjong matrons, Esther Chin, all of, you know, the older generation, they speak broken English. And so I wrote a lot of their speech in broken English. Some of the women speak better than the other women. And if you'll notice, Donna Fung, she's one of the characters that speaks impeccably well. And there's a reason for that. And that's in book 5. So we'll talk about that then. But there was a comment where someone said that they didn't like Lana's mom and that it wasn't realistic because Lana's mom talks about herself in third person. She calls herself mommy. So she'll be say, you don't love mommy anymore, or something like that, okay? And I was flipping through the book today and I was trying to figure out like exactly what I was going to say. Like, what am I going to talk about? Blah, blah, you know? And I was flipping through it and found a page where Lana's mom, Betty, is talking about herself in third person. And it reminded me of that comment. It always stuck with me because it was almost like a challenge. Like, nobody talks like that. Like, who even writes this stuff? Well, you've never met my mom. And even though Betty Lee is not my mom, I am inspired by the people in my life. You know, I do write what I know. And I say it like that, write what you know, because writers write both. They write what they know and they write what they don't know because we're exploring what we don't know, you know, and we're seeing like, how does that feel? And like each character, like how does characters interpret, you know, interpret. I had too much coffee. Anyways, you know, how do they interpret behavior, you know, whatever. So people really do talk like that. My mom talks like that. She'll, you know, and I think it's a translation kerfuffle because some of the words and the way that you talk and patterns of speech in, you know, Mandarin and Hokkien, Cantonese, like whatever, like it's Spanish, anything, the words don't always translate the exact. And the way that they talk is different. and the way that they construct their sentences is different. So I really try and make it as authentic as I possibly can. And, I just thought it was really funny because that, it's true. It's true to life. So, there you have that. But I kind of toned down because I would have to talk out loud to myself a lot. And I would have to practice, and I would use like in my head, like, how would my mom say that in real life? Um, and how would be different, for Asian American that was born here, was second generation, the differences in what you learn and what you don't learn, and also like what generation you come from, because that's going to affect what you learn and what you don't learn, and how it's received, I guess. In a later book, I do a flashback to 1901 Cleveland. The Chow Maniac. Well, I mean, obviously we'll get into that later, but I went back to 1901 and I did a little bit of research on that stuff, and the way that they perceived what was important to learn was very different than what is perceived now. So that's kind of my point. But I kind of toned down the speech patterns because it was a lot of work. I questioned myself a lot. There were certain things that just didn't translate right onto paper. But, ultimately that was my goal, is to try and make it as authentic as possible. And I feel like, some people will really resonate with that, because like when people talk to me on the phone and then they meet me later in person, they're like, I didn't know that you were Asian, and you were not what I expected. I used to work for a local drugstore, and that happened to me all the time. People would talk to me on the phone, and I would say, ask for me when you get here, and then they would ask me for me, and I'd be like, I'm me, and they would be like, what? So, always fun. But anyway, so that's the gist of everything. It is the beginning of the series is setting up, looking at the dynamics, watching the relationships evolve and get deeper, and see, the little pieces and stuff that make it a community. So I hope you enjoyed my little explanation. Like I said, this will be, the winner for this will be chosen on April 17th. I am looking forward to it. Signed copy, in case I ever forget to say that it's a signed copy. I want to say, so then next week we'll do Murder Lo Mein. And then I want to say that after that, maybe is when I start to have codes for audio. I have to look into that, because I can't, for some reason, I can't remember if the other company just had the first 3. I talked about that in a previous video. But anyways, there you go. I really quickly want to say thank you so much to the people who have entered the other contests and have left comments. A couple of you have asked me questions in the comments, and I, maybe did like a brief answer or something like that, or just hearted it. I will probably do some videos on the questions, because they were really good questions, and I think they deserve a more well-rounded explanation of things that you might find interesting. So I want to thank you for that. It's keeping me flowing, going forward into creating more content for you guys to enjoy. So I hope you enjoyed today, and I look forward to see what you guys have to say about this book, and good luck to the winner. And I will see you guys next time. But first, if nobody told you, my friends, you look absolutely amazing. Take care.